My friend, Ethan, was a year younger than me. He was assigned to our dorm room around the beginning of his sophomore year. He was tall, thin, and had a relatively intelligent face. From the start, he seemed like an outgoing and cheerful guy, but after about 6 months, his personality drastically changed. He started sleeping a lot, dozing off whenever he had a moment. Once, I invited him to form a game team. During a crucial battle, we waited endlessly for our support player's response. When I looked over, Ethan had fallen asleep, sitting upright in his chair, head tilted back, snoring. Initially, we in the dorm room were understanding. We thought it was just his habit. But then, one time, everyone went home for the holidays except Ethan. When I returned early, I called him to meet me at the bus station to help with my luggage. Half an hour later, he was nowhere to be found. I took a motorbike taxi back to the dorm only to find him still asleep. What was even crazier was that he hadn't even locked the door. Luckily, our room consisted of decent people, and all our belongings were untouched. The next day, our room held an intervention for him. No one yelled or cursed, but everyone was clearly frustrated. That's when Ethan finally confessed. His excessive sleeping was due to being haunted by a child ghost. First, let me tell you about his family background. His paternal grandmother used to sell paper offerings, and his parents often sent him to stay with her. One time, a few days before the Vulan festival, his grandmother received so many orders for paper effigies that there was no more space in the house. She brought some of them out onto the porch. Ethan was 5 years old then, unaware of any taboos. After 9 p.m., he still ventured out to the porch. His grandmother was busy painting eyes and mouths on effigies inside, and didn't notice him. He saw the paper figures and eagerly went to touch them, pulling back their clothes to look. At that moment, one of the paper figures suddenly toppled over. Fearing his grandmother would scold him if she found out, he bent down to pick it up, his eyes darting towards the door to see if she was coming out. As he tried to prop the figure up against the others, he felt as if someone was pushing it away. Every time he leaned it, it fell. The second time, just as he was about to set it upright again, the boy wet his pants when he noticed a face peeking out from behind. It told him that was Jitspot and pointed for Ethan to place the figure on the other side. The boy described the face he saw as childlike, but it had no eyebrows, no teeth, and its eyes and mouth were pitch black. Its hair was wet, and a murky red liquid seeped from its ears. It sat huddled among the paper figures, face tilted upwards, staring intently at Ethan's face. From the moment he saw that child, Ethan lost all awareness. The child told him to carry the paper figure to the other side, not letting him put it down even after they'd crossed the entire porch. Ethan said this child was incredibly foul-mouthed and malicious, constantly cursing and swearing as they walked, wishing for someone's family to have no descendants, threatening to strangle and gouge out the eyes of anyone it saw until the entire family was gone. When Ethan's arm grew tired and he tried to put the figure down, it crawled behind him, forcing him to keep carrying. If he refused, it would shove his head into a bush, scratching his face. By then, they had reached the neighbor's fence. If they continued, it would lead to his grandmother's outhouse and Bioga's pit. If his grandmother hadn't found him in time, the boy would surely have been drowned there, and no one would have known. Ethan's grandmother heard the dogs barking at a ghost and realized her grandson wasn't in the house. Panicked, she rushed out to the yard to find him. He recounted that she saw a trail of water stretching from the porch through the backyard to the path bordering the neighbor's house, where it vanished. Terrified, she ran back inside, grabbed a banana leaf cutting knife and a flashlight. She shone the light into the garden, swinging the knife at branches and leaves as she walked, intending to scare the ghost away. When she reached the bad luck tree, she saw Ethan standing there, holding the paper figure, his face turned towards the tree trunk, mumbling something unclear. His grandmother immediately raised her hand and chopped down hard on the tree trunk right next to the boy's head, simultaneously snatching the paper figure and throwing it away. Startled by the sudden action, Ethan was terrified. His eyes, hazy and confused, stared at his grandmother. Under the flashlight's beam, her face appeared ashen white, just like a paper effigy, making the boy both cry and wet himself. Ethan's grandmother, thinking her grandson was hurt, quickly picked him up and took him inside to change his clothes. It was then she saw scratches on the boy's face, as if he'd been clawed. She immediately knew who had done it. That very night, his grandmother went to the chicken coop, caught a rooster, slit its throat for blood, mixed it with raw rice, and burned several yellow talismans of the kind typically requested for funerals to paste on coffins. Her family sold such items, so she had plenty. She added the talisman ashes and incense ashes from the altar to the dish of blood and rice, kneading them thoroughly until her hands were stained crimson. When she was done, she went out to the porch and scattered handfuls of the mixture in all directions, howling, "Any boy or girl begging for food at my house in the middle of the night? Here, I give you rice, I give you meat. Come and eat." Afterwards, she turned off the lights, locked the door, washed her hands and feet, then went to bed and embraced Ethan, telling him not to be afraid because she would beat anyone who touched her grandchild to death. What Ethan's grandmother had prepared was called blood bait by those in the paper offering trade similar to bait for dogs or rats, but specifically targeting spirits of those who died on the streets or in markets. After lying down for a while, Ethan immediately heard a gnawing sound outside. His grandmother clenched her stomach and prayed that the spirit following her grandson would eat it. Even if the spirit wouldn't die from it, it would be scared away from her house, because the mixture also contained ashes from their family's incense burner. That night, Ethan couldn't close his eyes tightly in sleep. To this day, it's still the same. When he sleeps, his eyelids only half close, revealing more than half of the whites of his eyes, making him look as if he's staring. Ethan thought his grandmother's magic was enough to get rid of the ghost, and he didn't pay any more attention to the old story. The day he returned home to his parents, their 5-member family suddenly received devastating news. That day, he and his brother Sam, along with some neighbors' kids, went to play hide-and-seek behind their house. There was a ditch there, and beyond it, a dense thicket of neem trees. They played until evening. For the last round, everyone hid while Sam, his older brother, searched. But after 15 or 20 minutes, Sam didn't come to find them, and calling out to him yielded no response. The kids told each other that Sam had probably gone home, leaving them all to climb trees. So, no one played anymore. Each went to their own house. When Ethan entered his yard, his mother asked where his brother was. He said Sam had gone home early, But he wasn't inside the house. He couldn't have gone to the bathroom either. Ethan rushed back to the ditch, calling out, even climbing into the neem thicket to search. But Sam was nowhere to be found. Next, Ethan's entire family went out to search. Neighbors, who heard the story, also came to help. After searching everywhere without success, they thought his brother might have fallen into the ditch. Several people waded in to search. The water in the ditch was above their thighs, and even in the morning, the bottom wasn't visible. By night, the water had darkened, making it even harder to search. They frantically searched for 2 hours, until about 10 p.m. Still, unable to find Sam, Ethan's mother remained calm, calling for her son, hoping he was just hiding somewhere. But someone standing on a neem branch looked down at the ditch bank and saw an empty barrel with 2 small feet sticking out from inside. Everyone rushed over to see. The barrel was taller than an 8-year-old child, meaning it was taller than Sam. Yet, Ethan's brother had fallen headfirst into it. When they pulled him out, his body was ice cold, soaked from head to chest. The barrel contained only a shallow layer of water. Ethan's brother had died from drowning when his head was submerged, and in an inverted position. The barrel was too tall for him to get out. During the funeral, Ethan saw a strange child squatting in the yard, its eyes fixed on the coffin. It smiled eerily when it realized Ethan had noticed it. When he told his grandmother, she asked if he remembered what the child looked like. He described it as having no eyebrows, no teeth, pitch black eyes and mouth, and hair matted with water. Much later, his grandmother remembered that once the villagers had retrieved the body of a child who had slipped and drowned in the ditch a few nights earlier while hunting for rats. The child's body was displayed, with a rat still in its mouth. No one knew the exact circumstances of its death. That child was an orphan. The place where it used to live later became Mr. Miller's pigsty. The villagers buried it in the cemetery, but many still said that occasionally they saw a ghost hiding under the ditch bank, catching and eating rats. Ethan was terrified by this revelation, realizing that his brother had died an unjust death. Young souls who die tragically are said to be very potent. In the first week after Sam's death, Ethan, who was closest to him, saw his brother's spirit appear in the house. His parents had kept a few of his brother's new clothes for Ethan to wear, and this later led to further incidents. Early one morning during the first week after Sam's death, Ethan woke up with his parents to prepare a feast to welcome relatives for the ceremony. While the adults were busy in the yard, Ethan sat alone inside eating porridge. He sat opposite Sam's altar, but he couldn't eat much. He'd hold a spoonful of porridge in his mouth for 5 minutes before finally swallowing. Outside, it was still twilight, but the lights inside the house made the contrast very clear. Ethan was absolutely not mistaken about what he saw. As he ate, he looked around aimlessly. Next to Sam's altar was a window facing the backyard, one pane closed, one open. Suddenly, he saw a pale white face peeking inside. Ethan didn't even recognize whose face it was, but because he was sitting opposite Sam's altar, where the candlelight also illuminated a similarly pale face, he dropped the bowl of porridge he was holding onto the floor. Sam, unable to enter the house, could only stand and peer in from outside. Ethan was still young and didn't understand what was happening. He instinctively asked, "Sam, are you back?" His brother rolled his eyes back, staring towards the altar, speaking as if he were choking on water. "My shirt! My shirt! My shirt! Give me back my shirt!" The shirt Sam was referring to was the short-sleeved shirt Ethan was wearing. These were usually his brother's hand-me-downs. His family wasn't superstitious about such things and let him wear them. Ethan's mother heard the sound of the bowl breaking inside and rushed in. Ethan pointed to the backyard and said, "Sam is out there." His mother opened the window and looked out. There was just a drainage ditch. No one was there. Wow! When she turned back and asked, she learned that Sam had come back to demand his shirt. Because he had drowned, he was always cold, and being a spirit who died tragically in the open, he could only stand outside the door if he returned. Ethan's grandmother, hearing the story, said that when they were alive, the brothers were very harmonious and loved each other deeply. When Sam passed away, they had wrapped him fully in a blanket and clothes. So why would he return today to demand a shirt? Pondering this, she took a bundle of straw and led the family dog to the barrel where Sam had died. She tied the dog to a neem tree, then lit the straw bundle and began to heat the inside of the barrel with the fire, banging loudly on its metal walls for a while. The dog, standing near the barrel, suddenly jerked its leash. It barked fiercely towards one side, stopping every 3 barks. Ethan's grandmother stopped, looking in the direction the dog was lunging, and told the family to turn Sam's altar to the left, with its back against the wall, perpendicular to the ancestral altar. This was to prevent his spirit from facing the door anymore. She believed the drowned child's spirit was still lingering nearby, and seeing Sam's return, it was bullying him. That same night, Ethan's grandmother dreamed that Sam had returned. He stood outside the door, crying, still wearing a white t-shirt and shorts, saying his parents didn't love him and let him die so miserably. His grandmother asked, "How did you die?" Sam recounted that a child hiding in the barrel had drowned him, mistaking him for Ethan because of the clothes they both wore. After crying for a while, a middle-aged man came to take his brother away. His grandmother said that was Sam's great-great-uncle, his grandfather's younger brother. Thanks to the altar being reoriented that morning, the great-uncle and grandson were able to recognize each other. Ethan's grandmother woke up and went to the altar, lighting incense and praying for a long time. The next morning, she told his parents they had to take Ethan to the pagoda for a ritual. She feared that he and the drowned child had exchanged souls. Children are the most vulnerable to spiritual attacks. If caught and resolved early, it's not a big concern, but if delayed a bit, like in Ethan's case, while the immediate possession might be resolved, the karmic entanglement with the spirit world would not end. This entanglement, or duyenam as it's called in folklore, was truly just beginning. Ethan explained a bit about the mechanism of duyenam, spiritual entanglement. Who is said to have duyenam? In reality, a person doesn't just get haunted out of nowhere. First, that person must experience at least one event related to the other side. This could be accidentally witnessing a fatal accident or attending a funeral. A special case is having someone in the family involved in spiritual practices, which presents the highest likelihood of being haunted. Duyen affinity connection, as it's called, is like a spiritual link between two living people that only they can recognize Doyen on between two, like Sam and his great-great-uncle. That was Doyen and between two deceased individuals. Many people think being followed by a spirit is simple. But do they understand how difficult it is for Doyen Am to form between the living and the dead? To be frank, even between living people, it can take 18-20 years to find each other. The matter between two individuals from two different worlds is inherently very vague, even rarer and harder to believe. And Doyen here isn't romantic love. Doyen is more about compatible personalities, a feeling of familiarity upon first meeting. Between the living and the dead, Doyen usually doesn't exist in a positive sense. Rather, when a person is haunted by a spirit, it's more like an ordeal for them. Many people misunderstand about spirits touching them physically in their sleep, but Ethan explained that spirits in the afterlife don't have such worldly desires. The strange sensations some people experience during sleep can often be explained by psychophysiological phenomena, such as sleep paralysis or intense dreams. These usually stem from one's subconscious, especially when the body undergoes hormonal changes. If spirits truly wish to harm, they would torment both body and mind to the point where the living are neither human nor ghosts. Anyone who doesn't believe can look into those who have been truly haunted, possessed by evil spirits. They would describe it as utter misery, not those vague experiences. That's what I find most people often misunderstand. Spirits also have their limits, and their purpose in approaching the living is usually not benign. Please distinguish between being haunted and being blessed by ancestors. What are altars in the house for? Why are full moon offerings and death anniversaries celebrated annually? Of course, ancestors watch over their descendants. To speak of haunting means referring to those who died tragically, without family or worship, thus becoming wandering souls or malevolent spirits who seek to take others' lives. By now, everyone should somewhat understand the mechanism of being haunted. First, there must be an incident that sets the premise for the spirit to identify its target. But not everyone who attends a funeral or witnesses an accident will be affected this way. The second factor depends on that person's destiny and willpower. Simply put, their physical and mental state. No one should ever wish to be haunted by a spirit. It's very dangerous. Ethan believes children are the most susceptible to being followed by spirits because their nervous systems are not yet stable, or rather, they are weak-spirited, have fragile destinies, and their awareness is incomplete. Returning to Ethan's story, the drowned ghost that haunted him was later restrained at a pagoda. But even though the immediate possession was resolved, the boy was still afflicted with a spiritual entanglement. According to his horoscope, his innate destiny was flawed. Simply put, his brainwaves were more unique than ordinary people's and could pick up the frequencies of spirits. However, this process of picking up signals is very prolonged. As I said, DNM is incredibly difficult to form. To truly find a compatible spirit, Ethan had to endure 12 years of suffering, comparable to someone with epilepsy. He divided the entire process into 3 stages, starting from the event where the drowned boy led him away. The first stage was when Ethan was in 4th grade. He began to suffer from forgetfulness, remembering some things, but forgetting others. Due to the influence of the surrounding spirits and his developing mind, his brain simultaneously processed many streams of information. The boy would occasionally have sudden ideas, but he'd forget them very quickly. Sometimes he'd say one sentence and then immediately forget what he had just said. His academic performance wasn't as good as his peers, but luckily he was diligent. Despite his forgetfulness, he studied very hard. Because of this, Ethan's parents didn't suspect anything unusual about his symptoms. During this period, he also used to wander off. Ethan recounted one time he left home for the soccer field, but walked straight into the next village. When he suddenly looked around, he had no idea how he had gotten there. Another time, he went to the market to help his mother sell dried goods. His mother told him to go home and get plastic bags. The boy walked directly to the riverbank, which was 2 kilometers from their house. He said that time he heard the sound of a small drum beating right next to his ear. His feet just started walking on their own, and his mind couldn't think of anything else. His parents had to go search for him, and when they found him, they scolded and disciplined him for being too playful. Because Ethan was still young then, and the signs were vague, almost every child exhibits such absent-mindedness. After that, he grew up carefree. The spiritual entanglement was also nurtured from this period. Spirits are not deities with the power to give or take human life. What gives them influence is the interactive wavelength between both sides. Just like between two ordinary people, if there's a deep connection, Diane, they stay together through life and death. Duyanam is precisely the kind where, if they cannot live together, they will find every way to pull the other to die with them. The second stage began 2 years after the first stage ended, meaning after Ethan entered middle school, he regained control over his thoughts. The human brain is the most miraculous product of creation, allowing one to suppress or filter out erroneous information. From this point, Ethan no longer reacted to the streams of information from the surrounding spirits. Like his case, many children can see ghosts when they're young, but that ability disappears as they grow up. This phenomenon is widely explained online and has been scientifically proven. However, the brain still has vulnerabilities. At night, when the body relaxes and senses are disengaged, the wavelengths remain active. And the result was Ethan's insomnia. When he was in 7th grade, he started having difficulty falling asleep after lying down. Well, what? If he did sleep, it wasn't deep. Around 2 a.m., he would suddenly wake up, not naturally. In the darkness, Ethan would hear the faint tapping of a small drum, interspersed with whispering voices, sometimes distant, sometimes close. He couldn't hear clearly. The sounds were like auditory hallucinations, both frightening and unsettling, causing him to stay awake until morning. Initially, he managed to cope, but his mind grew heavier each day. His nerves became strained, and his health severely deteriorated during that period. His eyes were dark and sunken, looking sleep-deprived like an addict, his face hazy, his demeanor half awake, half asleep. Ethan's parents took him to the hospital. There, doctors diagnosed him as being in a sensitive developmental stage, with hormonal changes affecting his psychological and physiological state. They prescribed him sedatives, hormone-regulating medication, and some supplements. The medication did help him sleep, but because of this, a second symptom appeared. Ethan suffered from sleep paralysis and frequent nightmares. What he primarily dreamt of were familiar street scenes, but completely devoid of people. If there were any, their faces were indistinct, and he mostly dreamt of encountering children. There were recurring nightmares, which Ethan wouldn't detail, because in the end, he would always be pushed down and wake up with a jolt. His body would lurch, and his limbs felt as if they were dropping onto the bed, as if he had actually fallen. Sleep paralysis usually occurred closer to morning. Just when Ethan thought he was sleeping, he would suddenly feel his body become incredibly heavy, his limbs stiff or numb. His eyelids wouldn't open, but his eyeballs inside would dart around frantically, feeling as if an entire wardrobe had fallen on him, making it hard to breathe with a crushing pain in his chest. The most terrifying thing was that during sleep paralysis, Ethan would hear the distinct tapping of the small drum, always right next to his ear, a steady rhythmic sound. Someone had to touch him for him to wake up. It was very difficult for him to escape sleep paralysis on his own. Even if he could only move one finger, Ethan mostly just endured it. Each time, his entire body ached to the bone, from his chest to his stomach, as if someone had punched him. His eyes would be bloodshot, no different from someone who had stayed up all night. This was also the most miserable period for him, to the point where Ethan's growth was stunted due to lack of sleep. He had no appetite, and his body was frail. Ethan's parents saw their son lose 7 kilograms in 3 months, at an age when he should have been growing. They realized it wasn't just a physical ailment, but also a mental one. They tried everything from doctors to shamans, Eastern and Western remedies, but in the end, the boy still suffered from insomnia and loss of appetite. His grandmother was visiting Yentu at that time. Hearing about her grandson's illness, she asked for a handful of incense ashes from the pagoda censer and brought them home in her pocket. When she witnessed firsthand her grandson being tormented to the point of emaciation, she tied the bag of incense ashes above the boy's headboard, placed a cleaver under his bed, and slept it beside him for several nights to keep watch. About a week later, Ethan was able to sleep peacefully, no longer startled or suffering from sleep paralysis. This second stage didn't last long, totaling just over 6 months at its peak. It recurred a few times later, but it was not as concerning as before. Ethan's grandmother even had a shrine built for the earth god in their yard, fearing that the spirit had followed them from the road, so they worshipped the earth god to guard the 4 directions. With reverence comes blessings, and with caution comes well-being. Ethan's family prayed devoutly, and for the next few years, no one was troubled by spirits anymore. That is, until he entered Phase 3. This spiritual entanglement can last a lifetime. Because it was not definitively resolved, the dynam only fully manifested when Ethan got into university and moved to Hanoi. He had noticed strange symptoms 2 months prior, mainly excessive sleeping and erratic mood swings. Sometimes, while happily chatting with friends, he would suddenly snap, but then wouldn't understand why he was angry. He was constantly restless, unable to focus on completing any task. Ethan also mentioned that he recently started seeing and hearing the voices of spirits. I personally witnessed his changing temperament. One time, the whole room was playing cards, gambling slightly, but mostly as an excuse to share a meal. Near the end of the 5th round, Ethan had an episode. A few seconds before, he was excitedly calling out, "Form!" A card game term. But then he suddenly threw his cards down and even snatched other people's cards and tossed them away. At that moment, his face was contorted and he mumbled something under his breath. We shouted, "Why'd you suddenly do that?" The boy said nothing. He climbed onto his bed, turned his face to the wall, and went to sleep. The next day, he was laughing and talking as if nothing had happened. This meant that at that moment, his brainwaves were interfered with by a different frequency, making his actions involuntary. This temporary loss of control was due to being near a compatible broadcast source. Simply put, the spirit that had latched onto Ethan had appeared. Something similar can happen between two living people, but it's usually just an emotional influence, or telepathy, laughing and crying together. The kind of direct intrusion into the mind to affect reason is very rare. Only psychics can do that. Initially, Ethan's episodes were infrequent, but later they became more frequent, almost as if he had multiple personalities. He would be smiling, then suddenly his face would darken, only to return to normal conversation moments later. When we learned the root cause of the problem, we became scared ourselves, because by then, Ethan had started clearly seeing and hearing the voices of spirits. He said the voice was that of a child, which explained why he so often heard the tapping of the small drum. Since the dormitory was a public building, no deities guarded it, allowing spirits free entry and exit. Ethan concluded with one sentence: "That child is in this room with us." The ghost's exact form was still unclear. Ethan had only seen a grayish-white outline occasionally moving around the room. Hearing him say that sent chills down our spines. But none of us had the heart to shun him because of it. The boy had silently endured for so long. His dormmates felt more sympathy for him. I asked if living like that would be very dangerous, and that nerve damage would be hard to recover from later. "Is there a solution yet?" Ethan said. "Yes, there was a very sacred temple in Bac Ninh called Hamlong Pagoda, specializing in restraining spirits. He planned to make a trip there to resolve this entanglement." But Hamlong Pagoda was already very famous in spiritual circles. People whispered that the temple's location was extremely sacred, and its abbot possessed profound spiritual power, capable of subduing even the most malevolent spirit. Cases of being followed by spirits like Ethan's were not the most dangerous. Even more terrifying was Trung Tang, repeated deaths in a family caused by a vengeful spirit, where the deceased is manipulated by spiritual soldiers to take family members. Hamlong Pagoda has always been the place where the most such spirits are imprisoned nationwide. Many types of spirits are brought here, which is why the temple always feels cold, even in the middle of summer. If anyone intends to resolve a spiritual issue, I advise going to a pagoda. If possible, make a trip to Hamlong for a thorough resolution. Just standing in the temple courtyard, you will feel a strong current of spiritual energy flowing through you, a coldness deep in your bones, making you involuntarily tremble and kneel. As for seeking shamans for rituals, it's ineffective, leading to wasted money, prolonged illness and greater anxiety. But to bring a spirit to the pagoda, Ethan had to be able to truly interact with it. Meaning, both sides needed to see and talk to each other. Only then could the spirit following him be precisely subdued. If it remained vague and the spirit escaped again, everything would be ruined. For this reason, Ethan willingly lived in fear. If we hadn't discovered it, the boy would have continued to remain silent. When it comes to such matters, ignorance is bliss. But once you know, you're constantly on edge, jumping at shadows even in your sleep. After confiding in us, Ethan's temperament seemed more stable. Basically, the boy was afraid he would go insane before he could bring the spirit to the pagoda. He started to dread sleep. Staying alert during the day was easy. But at night, he couldn't bear it. Finally, Ethan asked his dormmates if he could sleep in each person's bed for one night. If he slept alone, he would just drift into a deep trance and be taken without knowing when. To be honest, everyone in our room was scared. But seeing Ethan struggle so much, we told ourselves to be steadfast. He himself had said that if there was no duyan, affinity, there was no need to worry about harm. We all agreed to help him. The first few days went normally, but then it was Ethan's turn to sleep in my bed. That night, something happened again. I was on the outside, Ethan on the inside. As I was dozing off, I heard a murmuring sound from inside the wall. I squinted my eyes to look over. I didn't know when Ethan had turned to face the wall, but it seemed he wasn't asleep. He was mumbling to himself, "What is it?" Then he answered himself, "A rice bowl and a pair of chopsticks," and then asked, "How long?" and answered, 49 days. I was so frightened that I slapped his shoulder, shaking him a few times and asking, "Are you asleep?" "What are you saying?" Ethan suddenly pushed my hand away. He didn't look back or move, but his mouth still said, "Get out." Right now, right now. Right now, the voice sounded like a sharp, clear child's voice. I couldn't tell if it was male or female. My face went pale with fear. I quickly pulled my hand back and lay absolutely still, my heart pounding. I was about to get out of bed. But then I thought, if I moved and it got angry, something bad might happen. So I didn't dare to sleep all night. Ethan also didn't say anything more after that. When I asked him in the morning who he was talking to last night and why I heard a child's voice, the boy's face turned pale. He said he didn't know. He had just slept all night. From that day on, Ethan reverted to talking to himself. Sometimes he would sulkily face a corner of the wall for an hour, not answering anyone who asked him anything, just mumbling to himself, day or night. This stage of Duyanam awakening primarily occurred within Ethan's thoughts. It didn't manifest externally much, but inherently it changed the boy. Many times, Ethan didn't even recognize his dollmates. He would purse his lips and glare at everyone, his attitude becoming increasingly irritable. Suddenly, one day, Ethan's grandmother also. Everyone spoke very normally. No one mentioned going to the pagoda. And then the whole family left together. The family had also requested a week's leave from the school for his treatment. We expected the situation to be a big commotion, but in reality it was resolved very quietly. When Ethan returned, the room buzzed with questions for him. The boy's complexion had improved significantly. The dark spot on his forehead was gone, and his mood was much cheerier than before. He said that actually, when he was sleeping in our beds, he was already showing signs of communicating with the spirit. But it seemed he could only speak in his subconscious. So someone needed to be nearby to listen and inform him. Once he could hear and speak, he would very quickly be able to see. Indeed, just over a week later, Ethan clearly discerned the spirit's form. It was still the grayish-white shadow, but he could now distinguish its limbs and face. The spirit rarely acted, mostly just sitting or curling up in a corner with its back to them. The child's temperament was not very cooperative. It was often demanding, liked to sleep, and was irritable, as a matter of course. Regarding the trip to the pagoda that day, Ethan had only secretly contacted his family, mainly his grandmother, to help choose an auspicious day. The spirit was a child, so its temperament was erratic. If it knew it was being forced to go to the pagoda, there was no way it would comply, and it would torment him terribly afterward. Throughout the journey to the pagoda, Ethan was in a semi-conscious state, not recognizing anyone, his mind sluggish. Then, suddenly, he woke up. He felt light and airy, as if strength had returned to his limbs, and his chest was no longer heavy. Most notably, the haunting dark shadow in his heart had vanished. Ethan felt like he had come back from the dead. Although he had a lingering dull ache from being pressed down by the spirit, overall, he was clear-headed. By then, he was sitting in the main sanctuary of Ham Long Pagoda, with the venerable monk performing the ritual to confine the spirit, reading scriptures in front of him. The boy heard the last few chimes, and his soul felt completely restored. When he asked, he learned he had been sitting there for 4 hours, his legs almost numb, unable to stand up. The spirit had been confined, and the entanglement resolved. His family immediately took Ethan home to recuperate. As the monk advised, on the road, one should avoid taking lives, and if possible, do some good deeds to accumulate merit. From then until now, Ethan is no longer bothered. But he still has to go to the hospital for neurological after effects. It's been 3 years. Tuyanam is not a game. If you want to know if you are being followed by a spirit, you should at least understand its root cause. Moreover, many people today make money from this spiritual profession. If you follow them blindly, based on intuition, you might just waste money unnecessarily. You might even inadvertently compromise your perfectly healthy destiny. Please remember that the yin and yang worlds are very close. Stepping out the door, you might encounter the deceased. If you are truly possessed without knowing it and are dragged away, you won't be able to call out to anyone. It's best to live with a calm mind, trusting in yourself more than in gods or Buddhas. There are also hundreds of thousands of types of people. Not everyone is haunted in the same way. Try to live optimistically. If you encounter misfortune, don't immediately think it's due to a haunting. Ghosts and demons are born from the mind. Thinking about them too much will make them real. It's better to simply pray for a peaceful life until your dying day. Matters of the spirit world cannot be controlled, even if you wish to. Anan, Adi and Al, sing what she